So, got a few notes here for you tonight. You just heard the Torah portion for tonight. Perhaps I should, if the internet works or if my phone works, perhaps I will electronically do what most pastors do when they're teaching. Not that it means anything, but at least it'll be a reminder for me. I should be able to say everything I need to say in about 30 minutes, right? You wish? Yeah. All right, tonight we're going to look at the Torah portion kind of like maybe like a little bit of a gold search. We're going to look for some nuggets in this particular portion. We've gone through it for decades, but you know that's the wonderful thing about the scriptures is every time you go through it, especially if you're tuned into the Holy Spirit, you can pick up something. So we've been through it dozens of times. Just about everybody has, I believe. But let's go through it one more time and maybe we'll pick up something fresh and new. Now I'm going to set the stage. The reading for tonight kind of did that in a very introductory way. We're going to set the stage for this story in the scriptures. By the way, whenever you hear about the story of Balak and Balaam, what do you think of first? The donkey. Okay. How many of you are old enough to remember Ed the talking horse? Boy, you guys are old. Those of you who are not old enough to remember that, it was a TV show, and through the magic of television, they had this horse, Mr. Ed, who could talk and communicate back and forth with his owner and other people. That was done strictly by human intellect and power, but everyone remembers the donkey. Well, the donkey is not really the star of the program. He's a part of it, but he's not the star. He shouldn't be. So hopefully we can take a little more mature look at it. We'll look at the cast of characters first. Balak. I always like to look at the meaning of people's names because in the scriptures, someone's name defines them. I'm Larry, but it doesn't say anything about me other than he's handsome and suave and debonair. But whatever my name means, I have no clue. But in this time and age, every name meant something. And in the age to come, we'll get a name that means something. Balak means a waster or destroyer. So this guy is a pretty bad dude. He was actually named a waster, a destroyer. One of the other primary characters is Balaam. You hear it pronounced all different ways. I listened to a Hebrew pronunciation of it today, and it's kind of a Balaam. We always kind of try to associate that with Baal, but it is not. His name simply means in Hebrew, a foreigner, not of the people. So Balaam was just a foreigner. We'll talk about where he lived. He was a Mesopotamian diviner. What's a diviner? Huh? Say what? Well, it has to do with witchcraft, in a sense. But we'll take a really close look at Balaam. There's something unusual about him. He had a relationship with the God of creation. It's kind of hard to understand. And he's often painted as a really bad guy, I think. And I think unfairly. And hopefully we'll see that as we go through this reading tonight. One of the other primary characters, I'm going to definitely put him before the donkey, is God himself. God is involved in this story very deeply. When I looked up all the references to Lord and God in this section, it always referred to Adonai, to El, or Elohim. So this is definitely the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of creation. Yet he has some sort of a relationship with this crazy guy from the Mesopotamian valley far away, and apparently has given him some power of prophecy and ability to see things. And then, of course, we got the donkey. Anybody remember what kind of donkey it was? It was a gray donkey. No. It was a female donkey. Why was that? Why do you think he had that? It's important to the story because Balaam gets a little bit abusive of his donkey. And it's important to understand that female donkeys are typically very, very docile as opposed to their jackass counterparts who are a bit cantankerous, tend to bite and kick and whatever. So, minor details there. And then the other character is the nation of Israel. What was the nation of Israel like at this time? They were hardened warriors. These were those who came out of the desert after 40 years. They were not tainted by all of the issues that their forefathers were in the desert. These were powerful men of war, not prone to sin apparently. They were preparing to go in and conquer the land. And there were a lot of them. We'll go into that a little bit too. Let's go to the geographical setting. If you think about Israel, you've got the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, the Jordan Valley, and the Dead Sea. The Jabbok comes in from the east, up here, and then the Arnon, did I get it backwards? Arnon comes in from the bottom. So, that is the land of Moab. The Arnon is the southernmost boundary of the land of Ammon, and then you've got some more folks up to the north and to the west, I think, too. So, there apparently is a plain in that area directly across from Jericho called the Plains of Moab. Now, these plains are at the foot, really, of the Jordanian mountains, and in the Bible they're called Abarim. And that area of Abarim is the ancient land of Moab. Included in that mountain range up above the plain, and it'll come, I do this because it'll come into play in the story, it includes Mount Pisgah, Mount Peor, and Mount Nebo. Those sound a little familiar? Okay. We'll dig into them a little bit. Just from a geographical reference point, somewhere up in the higher part of the Jordanian mountain range that goes virtually from north to south, there is an access road called the King's Highway that goes all the way from Mesopotamia to Egypt. And so that's very likely the route that Balaam took when he came in to do his business. All right. So we're going to look a little bit too at the motivating spirits in this story, because it's a spiritual story. It's not just a physical story, so we want to look at some of the the spiritual aspects of it as well. Let's go ahead and get into the portion. We'll start in 22. Now, I'm going to kind of read and skip through this. Hopefully you can stay with me. Get all my paraphernalia lined up here so I don't lose it. Now, the first verse is part of last week's portion, but I think it's good to read that. Then the sons of Israel journeyed and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan opposite Jericho. Okay, everybody's got a picture of this little tiny group of people sitting at the river waiting to cross over into the land. Okay. Now Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. So Moab was in great fear because of the people, for they were numerous, and Moab was in dread of the sons of Israel. Let me give you a little information that I dug up on why they should fear him. If you go to the next chapter, there is a census taken of all fighting men in all of the 12 tribes of Israel. The total of that is 601,730 fighting men. So over 500,000 fighting men. So you've seen a little bit now maybe why Balak was getting a little bit nervous. Plus he'd already heard about it. Now to give you an idea, in modern day military terms, a military division. How many of you have been in the military? Okay. Military division, you can correct me if you're wrong, but it ranges somewhat, but typically we can say it's about 15,000 men in each division. And that makes up, cooks and bottle washers and, gun cleaners and whatever. So, but they're all part of the structure. So about 15,000. So that means that Israel had 40 divisions of fighting men. So now we can understand pretty clearly why the spirit of fear overtook Balak. Because he actually said, we can't beat them physically, so we're going to have to get some spiritual help here. Israel had just done the same thing in its previous battles. They had the spiritual help of God to gain victory. But apparently by this time, they're well armed. They've battled and overcome the forces of Amalek and other folks, and now they're a powerful war force getting ready to go into the land. Of course, Balak, he was all concerned because he was afraid that this huge horde of people, so if there were 600,000 fighting men, then there had to be wives and children and cattle and sheep. So there's a couple of 3, maybe 4 million people who are in this valley and stretching as far as the eye can see. So he was really concerned. So he goes and he calls for some spiritual help. Now in verse 7 it says, the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian, since they're right next to each other, departed with the fees for divination in their hand, and they came to Balaam and repeated Balak's words to him. So Balak sent a call out. He sent a large bag of money to pay for him to come. Now, sometimes Balaam is portrayed as a prophet for hire. But Balaam decided to call upon the Lord. Verse 9 it says, then God came to Balaam and said, who are these men with you? And Balaam said to God, Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, has sent word to me about these Hebrew people. And God said to Balaam, God. So God's speaking to Balaam. It's not Satan, it's not Baal. God is speaking to him. Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed. So that was what Balak was trying to do, was to get someone with spiritual authority and power that had been demonstrated to come and to put a curse upon Israel so that they would be destroyed. So Balak is careful to approach God. Now, since there was a fee of divination being offered, that would mean that he used some objects. And so we think, well, boy, that's such a heathen thing. But think also about the breastplate of the high priest. There's the Urim and the Thummim in there, which are oracles that were used, and we don't know much about them, but they were used somehow in getting a decision made from God, in hearing from him and doing what he wanted them to do. So the use of oracles or lots, for instance, is not uncommon in the scriptures. They can be used for good or evil, since it's a spiritual thing. So God said to Balaam, "Do not go with them. You shall not curse the people, for they are blessed." So Balaam, he goes back to Moab, to Balak's leaders, and he tells them, "Nah, can't do it." So then what did Balak do? He says, "Well, obviously I didn't offer him enough money." So he sent another entourage with more important, impressive court officials. And what happened? (17) He says, "For I will indeed honor you richly." This is the word that was brought to Balaam from Balak. "And I will do whatever you say to me. Please come then and curse this people for me." Now here's Balaam's response. He said, "Though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything, either small or great, contrary to the command of the Lord my God." So he's not really a bad guy, right? He's listening to the Lord, and he says, "You can't buy me." He said, I hear from God. I only do what he tells me to do. This kind of sounds like what Jesus said, didn't he? I only do what I hear my Father doing. Okay, or see my Father doing. So he had him spend the night with him. So he goes, he says, let me, you guys stay the night, and I'll find out what else the Lord will speak to me. So he's going to keep trying on their behalf. Now we get into a little bit of a conundrum here. So let me read verse 20. "God came to Balaam at night and said to him, 'If the men have come to call you, rise up and go with them. But only the word which I speak to you shall you do.' So Balaam arose in the morning and saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. But God was angry." Is there a little bit of a problem there? I thought there was. So how do we resolve that issue? Go back to the middle of verse 20. There's a very powerful word there. It says, "If the men have come to call you." Speaking of in the morning. In other words, I believe what it's saying is, if these emissaries come in the morning and wake you up, then you can go with them. But you can only speak whatever I tell you. All right. So what did Balaam do? He rose up early in the morning. He doesn't say the guys came and woke him up and he got up, and he just says he arose early in the morning and he went with them. Saddled his donkey and went with the leaders of Moab. Sounds a little like Moses' instructions to speak to the rock. And he got a little upset and he struck the rock. And he had to pay a price. I think it's the same situation. It's simply disobedience, not being careful. I mean, if Balaam was a real prophet of God, then God had invested things in him and powers and authority in him, and he took it casually. He, just like Moses did, he disobeyed God. Instead of waiting for the Moabites to come and wake him up, because that was to be the sign to him that it was okay to go, instead he took it on his own authority and got up early before they did, went and got them out of bed, and off they go. And God was a little bit upset, because now you get into the donkey story. God was angry because he was going. Now, it wasn't truly just because he was going, it's because he went from the wrong spiritual motivation. God had said, if they come and wake you up, it's okay, you can go. But he apparently didn't want him to do it on his own authority. He wanted to have him fully submitted to God's word. So I think maybe that'll help to explain. It did for me to understand that it was just simply a matter of disobedience. He didn't follow God's instructions. So then I'm not going to really spend a lot of time on the story of the donkey, except just to let you know that the donkey explained to him that the donkey had been a faithful servant. And the donkey's eyes were, as we know, were open to see the angel. And what was the angel about ready to do? Well, he says here at the end of this, verse 33, but the donkey saw me and turned aside from me these 3 times. If she had not turned aside from me, I would surely have killed you just now and let her live. So the mission that God had sent him on, he started it with the wrong attitude, and God was displeased with that and was going to kill him for his disobedience, not because he went at God's word. God's always fair. So now, and again, verse 34, Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. So in other words, he recognized that he'd been disobedient. He recognized that something had gone wrong and he made a bad choice. He said, I have sinned. He was repentant. He said, I have sinned. And then he offers to, if it is displeasing to you, I will turn back. So, but apparently God's plan had something a little bit more. But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, go with the men, but you shall only speak the words which I tell you. So Balaam went along with the leaders of Balak. And Balak gets all excited. He's got this special spiritual weapon coming in. Balak does some sacrifices, and he sends some fresh meat over to Balaam and his crew, and they enjoy the meat. And then they have a meeting, and Balaam says to Balak, after Balak took him up to a high place, which is the high places of Baal, the places of sacrifice, to Baal. So he took him up to this top of one of these mountains, Pisgah perhaps, and Balaam told him you make a sacrifice to your God. Okay. The only place that sacrifices were supposed to be made to God, Elohim, was down in the plains where the tabernacle was. So these are offerings not properly made to God. They are made to the god Baal. So they make the offering, and Balaam says, okay, I'm going to go talk to the Lord again and see what he wants me to say to you this time. So now we're going to enter into a phase which I call the 3 blessings. (23, 8 through 10) is the first blessing. He starts out, he gives us a short discourse, and he says, how shall I curse whom God has not cursed? And how can I denounce whom the Lord has not denounced? As I see him from the top of the rocks, the mountain range, and I look at him from the hills, behold a people who dwells apart and will not be reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number the fourth part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his, like Israel's. Of course, poor old Balak, he about has a conniption fit. What have you done to me? I took you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have actually blessed them. So Balak said to him, please, come on, let's go to a different mountaintop, and you get a different view. He said, you won't be able to see everybody because there's so many of them, but you come up here and we'll look. And they did another offering, same thing, sacrificial offering. Went through the same scenario. Balaam goes and hears from the Lord, and he comes back to Balak, and he says in verse 21, he has not observed misfortune in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brings them out of Egypt. He is for them like the horns of the wild ox. For there is no omen against Jacob, nor is there any divination against Israel. At the proper time it shall be said to Jacob and to Israel what God has done. Behold, a people rises like a lioness, and as a lion it lifts itself. It will not lie down until it devours the prey and drinks the blood of the slain. Poor Balak goes ballistic. He says, cut it out. Don't even bless them anymore. Don't curse them. Don't worry. Just shut up. Don't do anything, he says. So they go through the whole rigmarole again. Chapter 24, when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he did not go as at other times to seek omens. So he had gone and cast lots or done whatever stuff that he wanted to do when he was talking with the Lord. He set his face toward the wilderness. Now here's a very interesting thing, again, that points out the fact that Balaam was not an evil prophet. Just not an evil prophet for hire. For me, it points it out. Verse 2, and Balaam lifted up his eyes and saw Israel camping tribe by tribe, and the Spirit of God came upon him. Okay, we tend to want to define everything. We want to pass judgment on everybody. But God is using Balaam in a way that we don't fully understand, perhaps, up to this point. So now he begins his third blessing. How fair are your tents, O Jacob, your dwellings, O Israel, like valleys that stretch out, like gardens beside the river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from his buckets, and his seed will be by many waters. And his king shall be higher than Agag, the Amalekite king. And his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He is for him like the horns of the wild ox. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and will crush their bones in pieces, and shatter them with his arrows. He couches, or basically lies down. He lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares arouse him? Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. Balak really went intercontinental ballistic this time. Then Balak's anger burned against Balaam, and he struck his hands together. That's a kingly thing, I think, which is to say, you're about to get killed. When the king claps his hands, all of his courtiers come around to see what he wants. So I think Balaam begins to get the picture. I called you to curse my enemies, but behold, you have persisted in blessing them these 3 times. Therefore, flee to your place now. I said I would honor you greatly, but behold, the Lord has held you back from honor. In other words, he blames God because you're not going to get paid. because your God got involved and didn't give me the answer I wanted. Then Balaam repeats, though Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not do anything contrary to the command of the Lord, either good or bad, of my own accord. What the Lord speaks, that I will speak. So he was faithful to speak the word of the Lord, even a threat upon his life and the loss of some huge financial reward. And what actually happens now in verse 14, and now behold, I am going to my people. Come and I will advise you what this people, Israel, will do to your people, Moab, in the days to come. So this thing that Balak hoped for, a curse upon, oh hush, you didn't give me enough time here. I'll try to wrap it up here pretty soon. Maybe by 10 o'clock. Took up and gave, in a way, a kind of a strange curse. I see him, but not now. Verse 17, I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob. A scepter shall rise from Israel, and shall crush the forehead of Moab, and tear down all the sons of Set, which is the sons of tumult. Edom shall be a possession. Seir, its enemies, also will be a possession, while Israel performs valiantly. One from Jacob shall have dominion and will destroy the remnant from the city. He goes on to curse Amalek, to curse Cain, and speaks about Kittim. All of them will come to destruction. Verse 24, so also will come to destruction. Ashur and Eber, Kittim. So he's prophesying concerning the destruction of these nations. He's blessed Israel, and he's now cursed all of these nations that are opposed to God's purpose. Then Balaam arose and departed and returned to his place, and Balak also went his way. Now there's a lot missing in the story right here, because we've all been, at least I have, been taught that Balaam told Balak that there was a way to destroy them, but they would do it themselves. And that sad commentary is in the very final part of the portion tonight. I call it Israel's first harlotry. We'll read it. It's a sad ending in a way, but it portends the future, I think. And while Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab, for they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. Did he not provide the commandments for them? You shall have no other gods before me. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. So here you have these, what were originally, as they were ready to go into the land, they had not been defiled, and that's part of the blessing that Balaam gave, was that these men are righteous and pure. You know, they're following God faithfully, and there's nothing I can do because of that. But apparently the word got back that if you could cause them to sin against their God, then they would be vulnerable. Credit is given to Balaam for that, and we'll look at a couple of scriptures for that. So Israel, in verse 25, 3, so Israel joined themselves to Baal of Peor, and the Lord was angry against Israel. The Lord said to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and execute them in broad daylight before the Lord, so that the fierce anger of the Lord may turn away from Israel. And then you get the story of the Midianite woman and the faithful priest, Eleazar, who drove them through with the spear. And that ends this area. But part of the cost was 24,000 of these beautiful Israeli soldiers died of a plague before they could make that move to redeem themselves. So, I didn't want to leave you hanging too long on that whole idea of when did Balaam tell Balak the secret of how to overcome Israel. It's only hinted at. If you want to turn over to Numbers 31:16, just a few pages over. And this is after a battle had taken place, and they had captured a lot of the women of Moab and Midian. And Moses was a bit upset with that in verse 15. And he mentions in verse 16, behold, these, the women, caused the sons of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor. So the plague was among the congregation of the Lord. So somewhere in the original narrative story that was left out. But Moses, apparently since he was there, he must have seen what happened or heard about it. So he wrote it down a little later. David, the psalmist, picks up on that in Psalms 106. Verse 28, they joined themselves also to Baal Peor and ate sacrifices offered to the dead. Thus they provoked him to anger with their deeds, and the plague broke out among them. And then we can do one final one, even over in the book of Revelation. Revelation 2:14. Yep, don't lose my boat. Get up there. Somebody want to read Revelation 2:14? The church of Pergamum had some problems.
But I have a few things against you because there are some who hold the teaching of Balaam, who kept the teaching of Balak, and to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel, to eat the things of sacrifice to idols and of commit acts of immorality.
Okay, so this sin of Peor, based on Balaam's intervention and encouragement, apparently, even though he was a really powerful prophet of God, there's no mention of him actually being paid any money that I've been able to find. You might find it. But even in the book of Revelation, Jesus reminds the church at Pergamum that they're doing the same thing that these formerly pure and suitable young men of Israel had contaminated themselves by worshiping other gods. And they violated God's law, his teachings concerning other gods. Now, what can we get out of this? What little gold nugget can we take home with us? You know, when we do these Torah portions, and even when they're done in the Jewish community, if you read some of their input, of course they refer back to all the commentaries, the Mishnah and whatever. But it's all the follow-up commentaries of men. But what can we take home with us here? I think Isaiah 54:17 may give us kind of an idea. Turn over to that one. Isaiah 54:17. I know you're in here somewhere. There we are. Should be a very familiar scripture. No weapon that is formed against you will prosper, and every tongue that accuses you in judgment you will condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. So, whether the weapons that are formed against us are spiritual or physical, it doesn't matter. I want to dig a little deeper into the words, the etymology, if you will. When that scripture in Isaiah says weapon, the Hebrew word is kali. That means it's something prepared. Any apparatus. It doesn't just mean a sword or a spear. It means anything that is prepared. No weapon, nothing prepared, no apparatus contrived against you, and this is my interpretation. And the word prosper really means to push forward. So in other words, promote. Nothing prepared, no apparatus contrived against you will be pushed forward to a successful conclusion. And every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you will declare to be wrong. That's what condemn means. Rasha, to be wrong. This is the nakalah, the heritage of the servant of the Lord. And their vindication is from me, declares the Lord. So just like Israel was, we are, because we are his servants. And no contrivance, no effort that comes against us is going to be successful in the long run. Perhaps temporarily. I mean, how many of us have escaped death? I personally have many times. Many of you have, I know as well, delivered from physical ailments, cancer, automobile accidents, whatever. So no contrivance of man or spirit is going to be successful. So we have that hope to come, that we will be proved right in what we do, that we will be vindicated by the Lord. So the challenge for us then is to trust the Lord. Go after him even as Balaam did. I mean, he was serious about it. He didn't do anything without going to the Lord to get his word and what he would say about it. And he promised repeatedly that's what he would speak, was only the word of God. I hope that most of us, even though it may sound a little weird, I hope that most of us or all of us can become a little more like Balaam when it comes to decision making. Now Balaam, because of his disobedience, much like Moses, he paid a high price. His life was taken in one of the battles later on. Moses was restricted from seeing the land in the flesh. So there's a price to pay if we disobey God. But it does not allow the agenda of the one who opposes him to become successful, not only in our lives, but in God's overall plan. So seek the Lord even like Balaam did. Be sincere and honest to hear a word from him. And if you don't hear a word, then you're just going to have to go back again like he did. Over and over again, you go back to get the clear word. And at some point, it's going to become clear. That's the way it has been in my life. I mean, Alice and I are still operating on the word that we received back in the middle 1970s. We've had no other word from God. But if you operate on the last word you received, that's where your power and authority comes from. We as Americans are trained to be impatient. We're kind of like Balak. We want to push things forward. We want to get things done now. And we want to pay out a lot of money to get it if we have to. But Balaam was the cautious, the careful. Got a little careless, as we all do, and he paid the price, as we all do. But he was diligent, and that's what I see in Balaam. He had a nice donkey, but the real story has very little to do with the donkey. Balaam was a prophet of God, and according to his own testimony in the reading that we did tonight, he did not do it for money. Now, maybe he changed his mind. I don't know, as the scriptures are not clear. But in any event, he paid the price, but I don't think it was for taking money. I think it was because he was disobedient. So you research it, prove me right or wrong. If you have really any questions, I'm going to talk to the pastor about it. He'll be back on duty next week. Shabbat Shalom.